So let's kick it off. Our first topic today is a topic from Kyle, which is switch to one DDS participant per context.
Now, Tomoya, I know you were.
Ruffin.
Hey, Ruffin. Tomoya, I know you were particularly interested in this, right? So really, the status of this, as far as I can tell, is that there are numerous pull requests pending for both RCL, RMW, and fast start TPS to enable this switch. On our side, we need to actually start supporting the context in our policies, which, Ruffin, you have good timing. I'm going to ambush you now. Which is something that Ruffin said he'd be able to do. I wanted to talk about both the latest status that we have on our side of this. Oh, there we go. As well as make sure that we're up to date on the latest commits over on the RCL side at the very least. But Tomoya, it sounded like you had some specific questions about this, so I wanted to open the floor to you and make sure we were able to answer your questions. Maybe not.
You're on mute, Ruffin.
No, I was talking to Tomoya, but yeah, Why don't we go ahead and talk to Ruffin? Ruffin, do you have any status update on the policy stuff?
Sorry, I got swamped with a potential trip to Korea, and then we were like booking all the travel and stuff, and then the coronavirus happened, and that threw my schedule. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I mean, this is open source, right? We've all got our own things to do, and no pressure. I just wanted to make sure that lines up with what we assumed anyway. So, is it still something you're planning on doing? You think you'll have time to do it?
If it's just the XML schema, are there some latest events I should catch up on in terms of an upstream of context?
Mostly there are several pull requests that you can take a look at. If you look at the agenda, you'll see at least the RCL one, but I'll share that as a link here as well. That's really where the meat of this is happening, and then you'll find fast RTPS and RMW ones that are related as well. Depending on how far down the stack you want to look. But that's the big one right there.
But to answer your question, Ruffin, the main things we discussed haven't changed. So the parts that need to change in the ROS2 sides are the same. And so what we discussed last time, the one thing I haven't looked in the PR is what is the actual default name of the context in the current PR. So that's the only thing we need to know. Otherwise, that would be more or less the same. And on the ROS2 side, the two things we say we would need to do is to update the schema to account for a context and use the default if not available. And the second thing is to be able to specify when invoking the tool which approach we want, basically which key store layout we want. In one case, we would want the new form, which is like, hey, make folders for context and insert just them keys and permissions for everything under it. And otherwise, just keep the old one. And what we would do in that case is actually try to leverage that as a different transport. So we would keep the default DDS transport as is, and we would have the DDS all nodes in one participant transport, which would make the new layout.
I was under the impression that everything would be under context, whether the user's deciding to use context or not, the default key store would be just under the default context.
I thought the key store was going to be namespaced the same, but instead of using fully qualified node names, we're just switching to using fully qualified context names. Does that not line up with others' understanding?
Yeah, context would prefix the node namespace, and so it'd be folders of context and the root of the key store, with the default like always present usually, and then in each context to be the paths. To
Well, I mean, each node is going to be sharing the context, right? They're not going to have their own identities. They'll be using the contexts. So does having the nodes nested underneath it actually make sense?
Oh, sorry, I was not muted. Sorry, there was an echo. So yeah, my understanding was that we would have like two different structures, because if we can actually, if we put everything under just the context thing, but have different permissions file under different subfolders for nodes, I'm not sure how it's going to work on the RCL side if we don't give a single permission file for the entire participant. So my understanding was that we would have just an option in the tool, in the command line of the tool, which is just use the context, and then we would like collapse all the permissions of the things, use a single identity, and create one single permission file for everything in that context. And if that is not specified, we would keep the current behavior, which is just like one participant per node, and so one identity per node.
You're talking about like the generation of this stuff, then, not necessarily how to find them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think we were talking about slightly different aspects of the same problem. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's coupled in a sense that how it's going to be looking for them in RCL is like the same idea. In one case, it's going to look for the context and then a file under it, just right under the context. And in the other case, it's going to look for a folder with the node name and then the file under it.
And that would be nested under the context? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think so, but yeah, I didn't look at the latest.
I didn't think so either.
Okay. Yeah, okay. No, sorry. What I meant is that I think if there would be like one case which is exactly the same as the old one, which is under the root of the key store, there would be a folder with a node name, like fully qualified node name.
Yeah.
And in the other case, the new case, at the root of the key store, there would be just a context folder and no subfolder. In that context folder, there would be one permission file and one CA, like certificate, and like no subfolders for the nodes.
Yeah, okay, that aligns with my understanding as well. It is a little bit hairy in that different DDS implementations will be able to do different things, which we'll need to keep in mind.
Yeah, to be very fair, I would have preferred if we could like keep this idea of participant and have a way to implement this logic that Cyclone has, which is just like, let's use the same communication stack if we need to, but like have different official participants in the DDS stack, because that allows us to keep access control and everything simple, or at least tangible.
Yeah, I mean, we're bound by what other DDS implementations do. It's not an ideal solution, but it's definitely a problem that needed a solution, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we're at the end of our 10 minutes for this section. If we want to continue this, maybe we'll start a thread in Matrix. So then I'm just trying to keep us on track for this meeting. The next discussion, again, Kyle, how are we hogging the discussion today?
Just 1 second. Do I just ask one question before we finish on this? Is just Rafin, do you think the several tasks we talk about are still like possible for you to make, or do you need any help to get these moving forward?
If you want to meet offline with me, we can coordinate further.
Okay, sounds great.
We can chat some more Matrix. Happy to help as necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome, thanks, guys. I really appreciate that.
If I may, though, sorry, I'm going to interrupt as well.
My God, Kyle.
Tamoya, do you have your audio working? Ah, shoot. Well, we'll make sure we get you invited to the Matrix room, okay? And we'll have a more detailed conversation there. Actually, I guess we don't need to invite him, do we? Go here, and you should be able to just join it. Or obviously, we can chat on Discourse as well. Okay, now we can move on, Joe.
Well, this is a very interesting topic that I think will be an easy way to increase overall security. Once again, not going for that impenetrable lock, but just to add a really good layer in that we can build on to improve security down the road. So Kyle, this is your SROS2 default policy.
Yeah, so this is something that Sid has been looking into. Sadly, he's not here today, so I'm going to have to pretend I know what I'm talking about. When we looked at when we talked about switching from the node mapping to context mapping for the participant, it opened up an interesting possibility that I want to talk about, and that is the default context names, or rather the fact that multiple ROS nodes can use the same context name regardless of whether it's the default one or not. And so we wanted to talk about maybe going towards a path of actually enabling encryption by default with no access control, using either the default or at least an agreed upon context. And so let me try to expand on this a little bit. One of the problems with enabling, let's ignore access control for a second. One of the problems with enabling encryption by default is that every debug tooling, every tool you want to use would need to have a key pair, would need, you know what I mean? There was a lot of upfront work to actually get to that point. And so it's not really reasonable to do that. But what if, and this is kind of coming back to what is that variable, Mikhail, that allows you to point a node to a given directory to use for the key material, so that you could actually make all your debug tools look there. And then
Node path?
Yeah, that one. It's basically the same idea, but using an agreed upon context name for that type of tooling, so that you can actually have an encryption enabled by default and still just use those tools. And then in production mode, maybe that's something you can turn off. It defends against, I mean, right now, by default, when you're using ROS, everything's just happening in the clear, right? And if you don't know any better and you start selling a robot like that, that's problematic. But even just encrypting everything with the same key is better than that.
That is very true. One concern I had with that originally, which is one of the reasons I didn't enable it by default in the design, was that I wanted people to think about how to distribute keys and how to deploy the robot, and so that's part of why I was like, oh, by default it's going to be ROS1 behavior, and this way, if you look at it on Wireshark or whatever, you can just find stuff as you expect. And then if you think of security in your deployed system, then you can look into what the ROS2 ecosystem provides for making things easier for you, but without the pretension of saying that actually we are going to provide everything you need, because in most cases what we're going to provide is not what people would want to deploy as is. But I do totally understand that I can see many scenarios where not having it enabled by default would bite people, especially people that do anything of time constraints, when people tune their algorithms and the performance, and then they actually enable encryption, and then they have to start all over again. So I can see it both ways.
No, that's
so one thing is maybe it could, yeah, enabling security by default I think is an admirable direction. I'd be worried about complacency, Mikhail mentioned about key distribution, where suddenly an entire department or org is all just using one X509 certificate, and so they only have an all or nothing evocation.
So we're worried about if we make this the default behavior, people will just assume, yeah, it's good enough, I don't need to do anything else.
It's not the behavior. It's more, I think it's more the tooling still. If we look at maybe other frameworks, have you ever used Docker Swarm? So this is slightly different because we're a distributed framework. But if we had the wheel spoke kind of framework, you have one kind of key server tool, which is what I had in ROS1, and then the user, when they want to add it to another device or a robot, is that they enroll or they register the node, device, robot, whatnot into the key server, and that generates a new credential, and then that handles the key distribution for them, so that if we want it, even if we had the system where security by default, it would be easily tangible to use, and it's also be scalable in terms of how you want to continuously add more and more peripherals to the network.
That's a great idea. I'm thinking of if anybody here has used Flask. So by default, like the Python Flask module, if you start it up in SSL, so it's a lightweight web server. It's like Django, but simpler. If you start it up using SSL, it just generates its own key, but it prints out a message basically saying that it's that it's a self-signed certificate. So maybe if we have sort of a dev mode version of it, we have it print out. We have it print out some sort of message like that, so it's easy to understand. This shouldn't be shipped into production. I just want to I want to make sure we don't spend too much time designing something that and never get it actually out the door. But I also don't want to design something that fools us into complacency. So maybe we can also once again follow up offline with design options and see what we can do, and if there's anything else we can reuse like that. Like taking an example from the Docker Swarm model that you described, Ruffin.
Something else to consider is ignoring the encryption by default, which actually, I mean, it has other ramifications, right? Which Mikhail pointed out, right? Performance ramifications that people may not want to opt into by default. A very, very similar problem is really just talking about the developer tooling. Like let's say it wasn't enabled by default, but once you do enable encryption, once you do enable the security plugins where you need the key store and stuff, then you get into the position of the debug tooling being really hard to use, especially now that, at least with the way the RCL is, they're removing that node path variable. Can we?
Oh, I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things I think they're willing to put it back if we argue about it. But I feel like if we can agree on like a tooling context name to use, then that's something we can enable if developer mode is enabled in the SROS2 CLI, so that all of the developer tools are useful even when you enable encryption, and then that's something you can disable when you go to production. So like it's the same proposal, but instead of doing it by default, it's just doing it when security is actually enabled. And then we don't need that variable.
Yeah, I think the thing is that like the new system would allow us to do the same thing without that variable, with a different mechanism.
But much prettier, yeah, exactly.
Which could be much prettier as long as people follow.
And do it by default.
And yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Like, I think it's always a matter of guideline. If it's properly documented and you tell people, oh, all your debugging tools should have that, like it should be fairly usable. As of like what the default should be, it's a hard question. Arguably we could say we should sign everything by default to ensure that you have all this authentication business going on and whatever, but not necessarily put the heat of encryption on everyone. And yeah, Rafin, I'll send you a link to that part of the thread, because I know like you've been the biggest user and advocate for that node variable that I still love using, but that's still like more your thing. And I thought I tagged you, but maybe I didn't on it. So I just tagged you so that we can follow up on that as well.
And I made a comment on there about this as well. We can continue conversation there, but something to think about.
Yeah, I think there's still cases for the node variable outside of debugging and outside of tooling, right?
Yeah,
where you need that manually override control.
Join that pull request then.
Cool. Okay. Great. I'll take an action that we're just going to explore this some more, and maybe we can talk about it again when we meet in 2 weeks. The next topic is so someone on GitHub. I'm sorry. Someone had suggested integrating sort of quality categories into the packaging. And so can we integrate security with that? So Kyle, your name's next to this one. You can
Of course it is,
run
yes.
with it again. I can go if you want.
No,
whatever you
I
want,
got
man.
this.
We
I got
talked
this.
about it before.
So at the last, I've talked to a couple of you about this. At the last steering committee meeting, William brought up what is it, 2004? Which is the pull request is on the agenda, but I'll share it here as well. It is a proposal to introduce package quality categories, and nowhere in here right now is security discussed, and I think William would like it to be there, but would like our input in order to have it. I think this impacts the other side of the vulnerability disclosure policy that we've been working on. Basically, if we can tell, security researchers how to disclose security issues, but we'll also need to design a way to actually handle those internally. And given that, this was raised in the last meeting, right? Given that we're an open source community and we don't maintain everything, Open Robotics doesn't maintain everything, right? There needs to be a clear way for those vulnerabilities to be disclosed to individual package authors, and also for us to know whether they're going to be responsive to those or not. And that can kind of come back to our VDP scoping, right? So if we can have a set of categories that include, yes, I will be responsive to vulnerability disclosures within a certain time frame, then that can trickle all the way back to our VDP, and we can say we cover projects, in the standard library that meet this quality standard. And that's something that I think that makes a lot of sense, but it's something that needs some thought. And so I wanted to make sure we were all aware that this was out there and to start thinking about it. And please comment on that PR as appropriate.
And maybe just food for thought. So in Ubuntu, we've got main and universe, and to get into main, a package, we do a main inclusion review. So we review everything. We review the history of CVEs, package updates, etc. But we take a look at the time from a vulnerability being disclosed, the time to patch, and use that to verify whether or not it could be in main. So I would say this isn't a totally new concept. It's just applying something I think that works pretty well for our open source project, with layering this open source project on top. So I think that would be that'd be some criteria that we could set. I think we even have another not often used community supported package in our universe, which basically someone, I'll use an example. I don't know. Noam has said they'll support this package and they'll guarantee to take care of it in this manner. So, and that gets a distinction of being community support as opposed to just a random universe package.
That was the biggest feedback I had after a quick read through this. Was I think the goal is admirable, but there needs to be a way for users to actually consume that, and there isn't right now. And actually, I used our repository components as an example of a way to do that. ROS only has the one component right now, but they could, using project categories, split it out into multiple components. Now, I mean, that's obviously Ubuntu specific, but the idea is an interesting one, right?
That's an idea I like. I made myself the same remark. I haven't put in my review yet, but actually on the other pull request for the ROS2 standard library, where it could actually be a way to define the ROS standard library, which is like what is considered as standard library, highly reliable, is also like security patched and basically meet all these criteria that are in this like level 1, 2, and at that point we could just say that the working group and the RVD basically like cover only that. And so I don't know in which rep it should be, but I totally agree that like an ID and most people using ROS are familiar with the Ubuntu ecosystem, and so it's not going to be foreign to everyone if we take that example. And having the officially support these things for companies would be very, very valuable, because they would say, okay, I know that anything in that list is okay, and anything not in that list requires closer attention. So I'm all up for it. Regarding security things itself, I don't know, like my only concern with this self-declared quality level is the self-declared part.
No, what? We all write great code.
Definitely, especially
Actually,
my
to-
unreviewed code to my own repository. Everyone should use it in production.
Actually, to complement on this point, just a quick question. Could we imagine having some security-related tools running in CI? And that would actually generate, a proper badge for a repository. So say, I don't know, a GitHub action with Coverity, and depending on the output, then you have a green, orange,
Yeah,
red
it's
badge.
a good idea. We just have to think it through on whether or not, like, if you, for instance, if you run a tool like Coverity on Python, it doesn't give you a response back on the security of Python, just on the code quality. Where then if you run Coverity against C, it'll actually give you the vulnerability assessment as well. So we just have to be careful that we don't give false positives. So we have to, but it's a great idea. Let's think it through a little more.
Coverity is an example, but yeah.
Yeah.
Although
to find the appropriate tool.
in some respect, talking about like the self-certifying aspect of this, right? Especially with regards to handling disclosures, right? It requires the maintainer to make a guarantee of some kind. Whether or not they'll meet it is one thing, but they've said they will, right? And automatic scanning isn't really. I mean, I think it's interesting and important, but it's a little bit tangential to what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think if we step back and take a look at it from that, I think this could work. And it's easy to be community policed, because if people don't,
you'll get
update
demoted.
after yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
And just to be clear, the CI thing is included in that description. That pull request actually specifies that people should have CI testing, like at least running static analysis and a specific set of linters. So it's kind of covered. It's not necessarily targeted.
Are those security specific, or is it just like it's quality related, right? Running Flake8 and okay.
Yeah, but also like CPP check or like things that can matter on the security side of things, but don't pretend to be as advanced as proper, most of the time, proprietary static analysis tools for security.
Yeah, we started using a new tool, Go Security, as part of our when we're looking at Go packages. So yeah, there's stuff comes out all the time. So cool. Okay, we'll
I just wanted to add one feature that might be interesting is to have the CI on the security policies themselves. So you were talking about disclosures. This may be about if we get the IDL stuff, that there would be a badge saying that this package supports, a working security policy setup if you want to incorporate it in your own. So
that's an interesting.
Not only run the CI without security, it would run the CI with like all the configurations with security DS, and that could tell you whether you're running into quality of service issues with encryption enabled, or whether you've configured your policy correctly.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, great idea.
That does
Cool.
line up nicely with the IDL. One way to make sure they keep in sync, right? Well, kind of, partially.
Well, you got to start somewhere. Okay, cool. And moving on to the last topic for today, we're over technically, but we'll jam this in because it's a short one. Kyle, just to get more people involved in the topic discussion. This is actually a good topic. This was to get, and I'll just take it so you don't have the only one talking this whole time.
Yeah.
This was to get people to, maybe if they want to in the beginning, or maybe we'll do, actually, let's do it at the end so we have time for everybody. We'll carve off 10 minutes maybe, or 5 minutes, depending on how many people are on the call, to talk about what they've been working on in the security space since the last call. So we could talk about some of the work we're doing with ODL, et cetera. And going forward, maybe having people do that sort of like a quick stand up, and we'll time box it so you only have a minute or something, depending upon the number of people on the call. Are there people in agreement with that? Let's do a call of yays. Yays?
Yeah.
I heard at least 3. How many nays do we have? I heard none.
Yeah.
I think we have
overwhelming
a question for clarification. I don't know, Rafin try to speak as well. And
Okay, yeah, let's go for it, man. Go.
I would be interested in, like, there are specific topics that I'm interested in hearing more about that have been mentioned sometimes, but like not explored closely. So I don't know if it's something that we can like actually put on the agenda ahead of time, saying like, hey, I would like to hear Kyle talk about this awesome thing. And
yeah, this doc is shared. It's the same one we have for every single month, and anybody can edit it. So you can always throw something on there. We'd love to have you add things to it.
All I do is erase the one that was there and start adding a new agenda. Anybody can do that. It's editable by everybody.
Yep.
Please add anything you want to talk about. That would be awesome.
Yep.
that's perfect. And can we put this agenda link in the invites? That's a totally logistic thing.
Oh, the calendar. The calendar. Yes.
Yeah, the calendar.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. We have been posting it in the discourse, but we can put it. We'll put it in the calendar. Absolutely. When it calls over, I'll add it. Absolutely. And maybe if we have a really interesting topic, we can do a separate. If there's enough people, we can do a. I don't know about you, but sometimes we can go over. Things can take a long time to discuss. In a chat or an email or a GitHub pull request. If there is something that's critical, we can always do a one-off call and devote it to one specific topic. But we'll also time box that so we don't delve down into bike shedding of everything about that. So, okay. Okay, Ruffin, I think you had one last thing too? No? Yes? I don't know. Making sure you have your chance.
I was in agreement with the moving the link to the calendar, but
okay, cool.
If we want to do the show and tell thing, now we can.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's start it next time because we're over this call, and I've got to jump onto another call. So we remember now we're meeting twice a month instead of once a month, so we've got much more time to chat. And if we're finding that a half an hour is too short, we can extend these. It's sometimes hard with everybody's calendar to get an hour, but we'll try a half an hour for a few more cycles and see how this goes before we try to steal more of your time.
One thing for the next meeting, I might send a link to the paper, a particular survey that might interest you guys.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, share link to a survey. Okay, cool. I put it in the notes, so we'll be able to bug you about it. Cool. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining. We'll post these on Discourse, all the notes from today. I'll update the calendar invite to have these notes in it, and we'll have even more engagement next time. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thanks for organizing.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.